Well, today, as I said, is Life Group Sunday, Life Group Launch Sunday, something we've been doing each year for the past few years. And what I want to address before we do and hear from the groups, and I'll explain what's going on around the outside, is to explain why we do this and why this matters. Relationships are difficult, are they not? Or is there anybody out here that has no issues with your... Yeah, exactly. Relationships are difficult. They're even difficult in your own family, so how much more everywhere else? I was looking at a couple quotes this week, which I thought were really good. Insanity does not run in my family. Rather, it strolls through, taking its time, and gets to know everyone personally. That's a good quote for a family. Or how about, I think a dysfunctional family is any family with more than one person in it. And I think that is absolutely true. And for those of you that know this old comedian, and some of you can relate to this, happiness is having a large, loving, caring, close-knit family in another city. Right? Relationships are difficult. We know that. I mean, families are complicated, and then we get into all the other relationships. They're complicated, and they're difficult, and they can be frustrating. And yet, Jesus said, the way the world is going to know that I love them is by how you live in relationships with each other. Now, I would wager that every single person in this room has relationships, right? You have friends, you have people that you hang out with, you have family, and so you may or may not see the need for life groups. So I'm going to unpack this just briefly before you hear from the life groups themselves. One preacher once said it this way, that circles are better than rows. And what he was trying to get at was, you can sit in the row Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, but that falls short of what it looks like to follow Jesus, because relationships are critical. And it's when you sit in a circle and you look people in the eye and start to get to know them one-on-one that relationships begin to change. So Jesus, he modeled this. He went through his whole life. He told his disciples, hey, relationships matter. How he modeled it for 3 years. They hung out. They did life together. He said, look, this is how it's going to be. If you don't live this way, the world's not going to know. In fact, they're going to know that you're mine by how you love each other, which means you have to be in community. And these disciples took his instructions so seriously that after Jesus died and he went back to heaven, they pooled their resources. They ate together, they spent time together, they worshiped together, they did life together, they put their time with each other, and it literally changed the world. And much of the New Testament writings, if you read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all the way through to Revelation, a lot of what they write about is actually about, well, how do you do relationships well? And John, one of Jesus' closest, if not his closest disciple, he wrote this at the very end of his life, so this is many, many years after Jesus had died, risen, and gone back to heaven. He wrote this. He says, we know, talking to other Christ followers, that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers. I'm going to talk about that again in a second. Anyone who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates his brother is a murderer. That's nice. And you know that no murderer has eternal life in them. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. I mean, you all know this. We've been talking about this for a couple of years, that we are a church where you can come as you are. We want people to invite them to be as they are, but we want to be changed. We want to grow. We want to learn how to love each other well and to love God better and to love the world around us. But the problem, of course, is that every single one of us comes with baggage. And now we're coming up on our 3rd anniversary here, so I've had a chance to get to know all you lovely people over the last few years. And what I've learned is, as fantastic as everybody is, every one of us has baggage, wounds, habits, messed up family histories, issues that actually prevent us from living this life the way Jesus designed it to live, right? Those are what they do, and Satan wants to exploit those in our lives. And so as we look at life groups, every single person in this room has had a wide variety of experiences with small groups, right? They started many, many years ago. They've been going on in the modern version for about 60 years, but, small groups have been around since Jesus. But you've all had different experiences. Some of you have had really good experiences. Some of you have had really bad experiences. A lot of you are somewhere in between. And what it's done, it's either predisposed you to accept or reject this idea of life groups. In fact, I will wager there are people who are not here this morning because it's Life Group Sunday. And maybe you are out there and you're agreeing with me, well, then I know relationships are important. Yeah, I've heard this my whole life, but I have plenty of relationships. I have people I hang out with. There's people I talk to. I don't really need more relationships. Maybe there are people who are friends for years. They're part of another church. I don't know. Well, here's the thing. If you have ever been in a life-giving life group, I don't need to sell you on it. You're already in. Okay, so hopefully you'll be encouraged by this morning. If you have some skepticism, you're a little bit cynical about this, I'm not trying to sell you on anything. But let me tell you why this is such a key value for Atlanta Road Alliance Church. Because I read this that John wrote about relationships. Do you know what? There's 3 things I think that life groups do. One is that life groups help us learn and grow. Do you remember what he said at the beginning? This is how we know what love is. Jesus laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for his brothers. Do you catch the subtext here? He says, the way you're going to really know what love is and what Jesus is like, it's by how we treat each other. In other words, your knowledge, your growth in Christian life cannot happen outside of relationship. Just can't. Right? If an isolated person, a person who won't engage in relationships, is limited and capped on their spiritual growth. You cannot know Jesus the way he asks. And in fact, John says, look, you want to know what this is? This is what Jesus did, and so if you want to know what that is, look at how you relate to others. So there has to be an opportunity to do that. So that's why life groups are so much more than just Bible study. Do you know that getting to know Jesus is not just simply about knowing your Bible better? It's about living it out in the context of relationships. Because you can know a lot of stuff and still be a jerk. I'm just saying. And you all know people like this, right? We want to be people who learn the scriptures and say, how does that apply in my life? How do I live it out? How do I do that? That's number 1. Number 2, life groups gives support. John, he's pretty clear. He says, look, if you have material possessions, in other words, if you have the ability to meet a need and you don't meet it, how can you call yourself a Jesus follower? You can't, is the implication. And I will say this, I've said this before, you'll hear me say it as long as I'm at this church. I have never yet met a person who was in regular, honest, genuine relationship in a life group who did not have their needs met when they needed it. Every time. No exceptions that I can think of. Because there was a group of people that said, hey, we get you. We care for you. We're here for you. I was in a life group for a while where about every 6 months someone bought a new house and moved. And if you don't want to see some stress, it's kind of having to help someone else pack their truck about every 6 months for about 2 years, right? But that's what our life group did. And you guys know this. You've experienced the people giving food, sending you texts, connecting with you, visits, helping financially, praying over you. You know how good this is. Someone said that relationships like this are like retirement savings. If you wait till you need it, it's too late. Group life relationships is preventative because other people can see what I can't, and they're willing to ask the questions that I can't. And by the way, this is why just having a bunch of fragmented relationships, I have a relationship over here and one over here, and I have a girlfriend over here, and I have this guy over here that I really like, and I meet with them for coffee, so I'm good relationally. It's the reason that doesn't fully satisfy, it doesn't do what Jesus said, is because there's no context of community that they can unpack what's going on day by day on a regular basis. But there's a third thing. Life groups actually drive God's mission. John says, look, you know how that we know we've passed from life to death? And what he's basically saying is, do you know how we know that we're actually followers of Jesus? That we are no longer lost in sin, that we are saved? Do you know how we know that, people? Not because of how you prayed, not because of a prayer you did, not because of what you know. It's how you love your brother. It's how you treat each other. That's how you prove it. That's how it works itself out in your life. So here's my challenge. I'm going to let the groups share about their groups. You might feel this morning like you're in and you've got sufficient relationships and that you're learning because you're in a study or you like to study the Word on your own. That's fantastic. It's great. Awesome. Maybe you feel like I have enough relationships with my family, my kids, and my grandkids and other that. I don't really feel like I need to be loved and supported. I kind of have that anyway. If neither of those trip your get you excited, then think about this. When you meet, it has a purpose. And it might just be that there are people around you that are lonely and need relationships, and you're the person that's going to give it to them. Because you don't need it, but they do. There are people around us. We are surrounded by an epidemic of people who are broken in our church, around our church, who need relationships, people who are lost, where you say, look, I don't really need that part of it, but I want to be on a mission to do this.